Hello, and welcome to the Biomass Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Anna Simet, and on this episode, we've got Chet Benham, president at Viridi Energy. Chet, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I think a good starting point today is having you tell us a little bit about your company, its origin, and what you guys are all about.
Yeah, great. It's actually kind of an interesting story, right? It's kind of a story of entrepreneurship, deep technical expertise, and a world-class balance sheet coming together kind of at the very beginning of a company's evolution rather than farther along. Our equity sponsor, Warburg Pincus, and a group of us industry veterans wanted to really find a way to get into the RNG space in a bit of a differentiated way, but also to do it rapidly. And so when we looked at the available opportunities, it was either acquisition or try and stand up an RNG platform company. We chose the latter, which is to try and stand up an RNG platform company with the best talent, because our thesis was that if you could recruit the best people from the industry and then turn them loose in a structured way, but with a $300 million equity commitment from Warburg, that we could find and deliver projects, on a really accelerated timeline. And I think really by any measure, looking at it really objectively, I would say that we're off to a great start. We've got 4 active projects in construction across 3 different feedstocks. And we've got a pipeline of opportunities that are, I would say, more or less within our control to develop and execute that really puts us, near the top of our peer group in terms of volume available over the next, call it 3 to 4 years. So really happy with where we are, finding a lot of great reception in the industry, and of course, having the backing of a world-class private equity firm like Warburg Pincus really lets us accelerate and has helped us attract, I think, the very best team in the industry.
Mm-hmm. There's just so much momentum in this space.
Absolutely.
So how has Viridi seen the development landscape change over, say, the last 12 to 18 months? And how do you guys play to those changes? And then what do you see looking ahead?
Yeah, it's a good question. All right. So, I've been in the RNG space a long time. I like to say since before there was an R in RNG. I would say that there's at least 2 things that any developer needs to have in terms of to be successful today. The first is either scale today, or at least the ability to develop to scale and then operate successfully at scale. I mean, clearly some of the disruptive deals in the last year have really changed the RNG industry. And what was big, I don't know, even 2 years ago is very relevant today, right? So in that landscape, you've really got to be able to get to or be at scale and then operate successfully at that large scale, I think, really to be relevant, right? So I think that's one of the really big changes. The other thing that developers have to have, and I keep coming back to this notion of talent, is that to be a successful developer, you need to take an end-to-end approach across the entire RNG value chain. And that starts at finding the right projects. Feedstocks are scarce, and it's a pretty intense fight for feedstocks. You need the ability to find, originate, develop projects, move them into operations, and then operate them successfully, safely, high plant availability, high level of methane recovery. And then you need to also have expertise in gas marketing, right? To extract the most value for the molecule, you need to have that level of expertise, which is one of the unique things about Viridi, is that our executive chairman, Andy Kelleher, comes from the energy trading space, was a former head of oil trading at Glencore, right? So he understands not just the trading field, but the energy sector in ways that really, I think, give us a good advantage there. But again, I think the big change that I've seen over the last even year, right, is operating at scale, and then the need to have deep, but I think equally as important, sustainable levels of expertise, in that fight for more and more scarce feedstock assets.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. So let's talk a little bit about pricing.
Sure.
What's your view on RNG pricing over the short, medium, and long term? And then how would you like to see the existing and future credit market programs evolve?
Yeah, great. As kind of a commercial guy, this is something I think about all the time. We're bullish on all of the market segments over the medium to long term. I mean, clearly, today's LCFS credit prices need to improve
Mhm.
to support even, I'd say, ongoing operations, let alone development of new projects. But we certainly see a recovery to sustainable levels as opposed to peak frothy levels, which is what we like to see, sustainable levels in any pricing. But we see a return to sustainable levels in the California credit markets in the coming years, right? The question is whether it's next year or the year after, but we certainly see a recovery as the fundamentals of the program are still strong. And CARB certainly takes a very careful view of how to make sure the right projects are being executed. So long term, we're bullish on LCFS despite the trough today. And we're all, like everybody, very excited to see broader adoption of low carbon fuel standards by other states and provinces. We're really, really bullish on the D3 and D5 RINs. And interestingly, we see a convergence of those credit prices between the D3 and the D5. People are starting to see food waste as an important part of the feedstock mix for RNG and really for other renewable fuels as well. But for RNG, again, we see a kind of a convergence of the credit prices between the D3 and D5 RINs, which is good for developers who are able to develop food waste projects. And of course, the voluntary markets, which I heard recently called the stationary markets, continue to be strong. We see, investment grade offtakes available. We see growth in that space, and we see kind of a momentum in both volume required for the voluntary market, but also pricing that can sustain investments for a long time into the future. So generally speaking, prices were bullish. As far as other credit and regulatory programs, we strongly believe that in order to develop the right structure for decarbonization solutions, you really do have to have a proper framework for these incentives. And our hope really is that in any new or modifications to existing programs, that the market gets to pick the winners and losers. We basically want to stand on an even playing field with other renewable fuels because we believe that RNG is one of the best molecules out there. So as long as we've got a fair fight, the market gets to pick who wins and loses. We're happy with whatever additional credit or regulatory programs come about.
Mm-hmm. So, Chet, what does the RNG portfolio look like for successful developers? In other words, most of the big success stories over the last years have mostly been companies focused on single types of projects. Do you see that changing?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? It's sort of one of the big themes in RNG right now. I mean, absolutely, right? I like to say that most of the easy stuff, unfortunately, has been done. Quote, good old days of selecting the best landfills and leisurely developing these projects. That time's over, right? Today, developers need something akin to the all of the above approach to decarbonization, which is what I call an intelligent all of the above approach to feedstocks and even geographies, right? I mean, certainly as a fight for feedstocks become more intense, an entity's got to be comfortable working all over the country into Canada, potentially even into Central America. So again, an intelligent approach to doing all the above. I think, again, coming back to the point of talent, to move into more, for lack of a better term, exotic feedstocks, again, you really need a strong depth of technical, operational, even commercial talent, right? Because the contract structure, the feedstock agreements are substantially different than the quote good old days. So again, you need the right talent, the right people to make that successful. But certainly, feedstock agnosticism is the name of the game today if you want to grow at scale.
Yeah. So you've been in the RNG space for 15 years. That's a long time.
It
What
is.
is the single most important change that you've seen over this time period?
Very, very good question, right? So, I guess I would say my first answer is the increase in the level of technical and commercial expertise required to be successful. I mean, that's been pretty a common theme throughout the discussion. But I think specifically, I'd like to split the answer into two parts: sort of what I've seen and what I expect to see. And what I've seen again is the level of sophistication of developers and operators has been increasing over the last decade, but has been really rapidly increasing over the last even 24 months, right? As recently as 5 years ago, it used to be the quintessential two guys in a pickup truck. And it actually was mostly men, right? I'm very happy to see more diversity in the RNG space. But 5 years ago, two guys in a pickup truck could find a project, raise some money, put gas in the pipeline. But today, with the increase in scale, expectation of structurally lower marginal cost of production, that's definitely brought a more disciplined approach to the industry. And I think an important focus on the part of developers on industrialization. And all of this culminates in again, a structurally lower marginal cost of production. Now, what I expect to see is new technology. I'm kind of a technology guy, and so I watch this stuff very closely, and I see a proliferation of new technologies, at least on the upgrading side, that really bring the opportunity to, again, structurally lower marginal cost of production by increasing plant reliability, significantly higher methane recovery, all resulting in lower operating costs. But in order to deploy these new technologies, there need to be a deeper understanding of gas processing technologies. So people who come from the traditional oil and gas industry that know about how to operate complex gas processing systems, I think that's sort of where the next big thing in RNG is structurally lower TCO, total cost of ownership, and higher recovery, higher reliability. So really exciting things happening, and it's been a weird, wild ride over the last 15 years, and I couldn't be more excited about where the industry's headed.
Exciting stuff. So, Chet, I'm at the end of my questions. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, I think again, I'll come back to the point of diversity, right? I'm the father of two daughters, right? And I'm extremely happy to see, more and more diversity in the RNG space. So as we grow our team, we're certainly looking for people who can help bring a new outlook on the business. And I'm so really happy to see that happening. So really happy. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. It's really been a pleasure learning more about your company, Viridi. Thanks so much for chatting with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time.